So welcome everyone. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you so much for joining us, Drew. I don't know if you had specific talking points that you wanted to go over, but we were really hoping to just have you give an overview of the work that you've done and how you have sort of entered the water space and the role that community has played in the activism that you've done with both Just Water and 501c3.
Sure. If that's what you want, just to talk about how I got in this little origin story, that's what I'll do.
Awesome.
I started in the arts. I graduated from Syracuse with a degree in painting, much to my Irish dad's chagrin. And somehow I landed in hip hop and R&B in New York City, which was an odd place, but I ended up doing pretty well there and got asked to come out to LA to work on Mary J. Blige, which was quite an honor. And I continued to work with Mary for about 5 years. And that's where I met Will Smith when he was still recording albums. And it was part of Universal Studios. And, I exhibited a pretty good talent from a graphic design standpoint and a visualization standpoint, and started to, eventually work with bigger brands and Hollywood, when brands were descending on Hollywood. And eventually I got to a point where I was tired of just making stuff look cool, like movie posters and CDs and art and TV commercials and stuff. It was just it wasn't soulless per se because it looked neat, but I think from growing up in an environment, in a household that was full of volunteerism. My mom ran the United Way for 3 counties in my area. My dad was big at the YMCA and also United Way. I had a sort of a DNA of empathy and give back. And, I started to say, look, I'm pretty good in this particular skill set. Where is this skill set really needed? And that was right about the time when Jaden Smith was about 12 and his sister was 9. And somehow or another, our offices were near each other, next to where their school was. And they used to come in, or as the story goes, they would go up to, Jaden would run up to his dad and be like, Dad, there's an entire garbage patch in the ocean. And Dad, why don't we have solar panels doing the house? And Will would say, well, I don't know, go talk to your mother. And then Jada would be like, babe, I don't know, but I think probably go talk to Drew. He seems like someone that would have the wherewithal to want to, help mentor a 14-year-old kid. So Jaden came to me, and really, quite frankly, are about the same age maturity wise. And so it was easy for us to get along. But in our partnership, he actually probably is the more mature. And, I said to Will and Jade, I said, listen, if you want me to take the kids on from like a mentor-mentee standpoint, I said, I'll do that. But what would be best is if I could be the best version of myself. So I said, can you send me to MIT for a crash course on everything, right? And they're like, yeah, definitely. And so when I was at MIT and I started learning, from coming from an arts background, I started looking around, I just was absolutely blown away by the types of technology that I've seen across energy, food, water, and also learning about, God bless you, Shell B, and also their understanding what are some of the challenges, technologies that are what I would refer to as great public health challenges, great life-saving technologies. What are some of the challenges they're having? And what I realized after I read a white paper of a woman from Stern, which is the business school at MIT, Sloan, sorry, Stern is NYU, was that there's a funding gap for all these technologies, and that charitable capital can do that. Meaning, if let's say there's 2 people in a room, right? One person is inventing the next Snapchat, right? And one person is inventing the next battery storage technology or water filtration technology, okay? Right here. Okay, guess who's gonna get funded first? This guy or girl, right? Now, his or her new Snapchat is not necessarily a technology for social change, but she can get a user base really easy, and Venture's gonna go, we love it. You got 10,000 users already, here's some money. And then over here, Venture's not gonna touch this because it's too risky. But the problem is this technology could very well be a life-saving technology, but this Snapchat thing was made in a year. This technology is not going to prove itself for probably like 3 or 4 or 5 years, right? And so what happens is in the past, technologies like that have died. And that sucks because these are technologies that really need to get out of the lab and affect people all around the world in different types of communities and different socioeconomic stratas. And so what some of the things that we had done early on with this group called the Prime Coalition is to say, even though this person's a for-profit company, charities can give them money. So philanthropic capital is a way to de-risk early stage technology. And this is really important for all of you people that want to do startups and want to do technologies, is that if you're a little kind of early and you maybe don't have revenue or something like that, you can look at philanthropic capital as an option after friends and families or winning grants or, school, accelerator contests or something like that. Is charitable capital can help you, charitable grants can help you de-risk over this timeline. And what also happens by charity, because charitable grants are kind of one way, you don't dilute. And that's a really important thing. Whereas if there's $100,000 from a charity and there's $100,000 from sort of a conscientious venture capital, this second guy's going to want to take a piece of your company. Maybe not a lot, but you're going to give away part of your company for that 100,000. The charity is not. So that's something to think about. So I got involved with that, and I got Will and Jada's foundation to give this woman from Sloan a grant to get her thing off the ground, and now she runs an $80 million fund. So that was about 9 years ago. So coming back from MIT and understanding what was there, I realized that there was a place for me at MIT, because I realized that at least the engineers that I was dealing with at MIT, while brilliant, bright, and masterful, really kind of sucked at storytelling. They weren't great at communicating not only what the outcome of their work is, but how their technology works, and what the human side of the technology is. And I use an anecdote. The head of material science at MIT is a guy named Jeff Gross, wicked bright, nice guy, couldn't be, but if you're the head of a department at MIT, that could be like that's a big deal job. That could be like the first line of your obituary, right? And so when I talk to Jeff and I kind of use him as an example and kind of poke fun of him, I'll say, hey, Jeff, what are you working on this week in your lab? He said, oh, I'm fabricating nanoscale desalinating graphene meshes, right? And I said, no, you're not, dude. I said, what you're doing is reducing gender-based violence in the developing world, because women and girls are not out foraging for water because they can purify with your low-cost membrane. Hence, allowing women and girls in, let's say, a country like Botswana to actually attend school more. And as we know, education of women and girls is one of the silver bullets in climate change. There's a little factoid that came out from the UN that if every girl on the planet got a K through 12 education, we would have 1 billion less people on the planet by 2050. Because there's an inverse of level of education equals not as many children versus lack of education is more children in a household or a family. It's just an interesting factor. So I ended up developing a really good aptitude at MIT and became the creative director of the oldest school at MIT, civil environmental engineering, which has a lot to do with water, big water, water data, water management, water systems, things like that, as well as environmental engineering and things like that, and fabrication materials and things like that. And then on the other side of the campus, I guess I did a good job at MIT, and the president asked me to hop on to the other side of the campus to something called the Plasma Science and Fusion Center, and that's nuclear physics, which I didn't really know a lot about, but I had to sign a bunch of NDAs, and I quickly became an expert in it. And so I helped this particular department get one of the most promising energy technologies on the planet that's out into a for-profit company, and it's called Commonwealth Fusion Systems, and it's like the Prius of fusion, electromagnetic fusion reactors, and that's basically like taking the sun and putting it down on the earth and encapsulating it into like a case. And as we know, the sun is limitless power. The sun's not going to run out anytime soon. And it had by synthesizing something as hot as the sun on the surface of the ground here, you can do that with electromagnetic plasma fusion. It's powerless, carbon-free, limitless energy. So if you guys are all kind of interested in science and want to, nerd out on, future tech, I highly recommend you look up fusion with Commonwealth Fusion Systems, because it is wicked legit. If I had to only work for one thing for the rest of my career, that would be it. But I'm not, because I got so many interests. So anyway, all right, back to the show. So Will and Jaden are sitting in my office, and I said, they're like, why aren't we doing all this great stuff for the environment? It turned out to be kind of a what started as a sort of an ecology lesson or a sustainability lesson really came into like a dollars and cents business lesson. When somebody says, why isn't the state of California powered by solar? Well, there's a cost. There's a cost parity with oil and gas and how it's done now. And there's storage and all this kind of stuff. And so started off as sustainability lessons really turned into kind of like a mini MBA for, a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old. And as a result of it, I said, all right, why don't we do this? Let's create a company, a fake company, like a mock company, and let's design it the way we would like to see it designed, ethically and morally and economically sustainable. And they're like, yeah. And I go, what do you want to do? And they naturally gravitate towards bottled water. I said, Great. That's a great place to start. And let's look at the way bottled water is made today. Let's look, who are the big players? What's plastic? What's it made from? Why is it good? Why is it bad? Where's a good place to get water? How is it helping people? Where are you employing people? And let's just go through the whole entire thing of a product. And so we ended up creating Just Water, which I have in my hand here as a prop. You may have seen this in the store. And there's a kind of a funny story about Just Water. The reason it came in this package is I'm 50. And when I'll be 51 in May, yikes. When I was 40, was with my family in Italy and Florence, and I was walking over to a garbage can and I was like throwing out, I don't know, a cup or something like that. And I looked in this garbage can right in the middle of Florence. I looked in this garbage can and I saw a milk thing in a bottle like this. And I was like, oh my God, that's awesome. What is it? So I pulled it out, it was gross, and I'm like wiping it off, and I brought it back to America, and I called the company and they wouldn't return my call. And I was just like, so finally I had to pull dad out of retirement and get him to call the company. And then now it's like when an indie film wins Best Picture, like everybody tries to take credit for it, but nobody was really there in the beginning. So now everyone over at Tetra Pak's like, oh yeah, we always loved this. It was already, and you're like, yeah, okay. But regardless of which, we started this and this has gone well. And we learned about, obviously material inputs of paper, and this is from bioplastic from Brazil. So this is not a polymer at like you would say, no, those are actually a cyclopolymer. Like these glasses are made from petroleum. This is 100% PET, not PET. It's probably HDPE, whatever. It's a polymer. So this is from oil out of the ground. This is from a plant that grows back. And so when we first started, this was plastic, but then I pushed Tetra Pak to go and use some of the technology they have out of Brazil and just pushed the company to do more and more innovation on this. And I went down to Brazil, which was awesome. We shot a video, it's on YouTube, check it out. And this is still a plastic, it recycles in the value chain, but it's not from petroleum. So that's a good step. And so one of the things that we started this off that I established as a mantra in the company was, I don't want anyone to ever say, we're changing the world one bottle at a time. That's such a cop-out expression for a brand. I said, instead, this is a lens into doing things better. This is a way you can do, this should be a portfolio piece to show how, Nestle should be using bioplastic. Nestle is probably 10,000 times bigger than our company, and they should be using it. So if we can be the people that are showing it and we bring our social media heft and attention to it, then we're doing our job. And we're also doing a good thing with this particular bottle. The other thing that I had established when we started the company is this is something that is even more relevant today as you go out into your companies or into companies that you either work for or you start up, is that always remember this: it's not what you sell, it's what you stand for. And that's really, 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 really important. And that's never going to run out. Specifically with Gen Z, y'all, I don't know what the median age on this call is, but if there's a lot of Gen Z on this call, you all are in the driver's seat. You are going to have the most economic heft and the most cultural influence in the next 15 years. And corporations better realize, they do realize that, quite frankly. And you demand better, and if not, you can reject them. There's lots of options out there. So as you start off in your journeys entrepreneurially, it's always remember, it's not what you sell, it's what you stand for. Because you all, your generation demands other brands that you want to be with to stand for something. Hey, Chipotle, are you helping out? Hey, Sweetgreens, what are you doing that's good? Are you preventing food waste? Are you doing this? And Chipotle and Sweetgreens know they need to have CSR and stand for something, or they're going to go someplace else. Okay, so because we developed a water company, and Madeline or Stuart, am I rambling? Is this questions or is this on strategy?
This is awesome.
You're awesome.
Yeah, just like we said, a background of what you're doing and what you've done, and then we can sort of open it up for more of a discussion with the atmosphere.
I'm almost done.
Yeah,
laid the platform.
Drew, can you also talk about Water in a Box and how you've worked with that and Flint, and then how you've expanded that recently? And we want to engage the emissaries as much as we can to have them ask questions. And
sure.
So you're doing great as always. Thank you.
I'm almost done. I'm in the second act. I'm about to do the third act. So we're going to figure out and we're going to figure out who done it. So from this, and because I've worked with these technologies at MIT that are water technologies, and I just was surrounded by water engineers, right? And I became a water expert throughout the course of doing this because I wanted to do it right. I wanted to be a founder that really, really could speak about water and could speak about water challenges, all over the country and all over the world, what that means. And so there was an old expression by an old guy who's dead now named David Ogilvy, who had said, you need to know your, like, he was an advertising guy, but he would say, the way I success in advertising is I need to know my client's business better than they do, so I can help them tell their story. And so I wanted to become an expert at all things water. And so because I was steeped with a lot of people, and because we built, just real quick thing, we ended up, so that with this, they go, hey, where should we go to get the water? People are like, go to Maine. That's where Polar Spring is. And I was like, no, you should do it in my hometown, which is up in the Adirondacks, right? So, because we have tons and tons of water. And then I was really adamant, I didn't want to build some like net new building, like off in the outskirts of town, because my town, which is a manufacturing town, had a lot of vacant buildings. I was like, we should buy a building that's there. So we bought a church. The very first thing we did was a church that I went to church at when I was like 5 years old. And so, and it was owned by the Salvation Army. We bought it, we turned it into a state-of-the-art water facility. So let's go back, I don't know, 42 years, okay, and I'm sitting in a pew at church, and it's after a hockey practice. I'm sitting there going, this is a pretty cool church. You know what I'm gonna do? I am gonna go to Hollywood, I'm gonna do a bunch of stuff, and I'm come back here and I'm gonna turn this church into a state-of-the-art water facility with a famous celebrity. So if that happened, and I didn't say that, what should I manifest now for the next 40 years? You know, I feel like I'm gonna take, I don't know, I'm gonna build a house on Mars, just manifest it. I don't know. So anyway, so from there, we looked around and we were like, Jade and I were like, okay, well, let's start a water nonprofit. Let's go help people that don't have water. And so we were like, let's go to Africa, naively. And we went down to USAID, which is a nonprofit. It's a big relief organization down in Washington, D.C. And we're like, hey, we want to go to Africa and do water. Wouldn't that be neat? And the guy's like, dude, don't do that. He's like, that's ridiculous. He said, you don't have enough hardware. You can't tolerate the slow pace. You can't tolerate the corruption. And there's a lot of people already doing water on that continent. So you know what, you know what I would recommend? And he's like, yeah. He goes, look behind you. Look into America. Look at Flint. There is nobody in the American space that is taking communities, specifically Black and Brown communities, taking their water problem seriously. And Flint had happened for 5 years. It was disastrous. There really was no relief. And you have a community, an African-American community largely, that is subsiding on bottled water. And that's expensive. It's wasteful. It's inhuman. It's not dignified. It's scary. And it has a carbon footprint, right? And so we were like, oh yeah, okay. But the thing is, we'd seen like a lot of like kind of celebs and politicians like taking selfies, like, hey, I'm at Flint. Hey, check me out at Flint. It's like, yeah, but what are you doing? Like, don't do that on the backs of, a community. Like, go and take, a selfie and post it like, here, hashtag Flint, whatever. It's kind of a, depending what degree, it's a little exploitive, right? So I asked around and I did a little research. It's like, how can I go to Flint and not be irresponsible, right? So it's one thing is like, hey, I know how to do technology, but this is not a technological issue. This is a sociological issue. This is a community and a cultural issue, right? Don't be white guy and celebrity walking into Flint being like, hey, we're gonna fix your problems. That's just like so tone deaf. So when you're doing work in communities that aren't like the community you're in, there's a sensitivity about how you discuss this and how you don't pejoritize the community, but rather you go in and be a woman or a man of your word, that when you're delivering something, you deliver on it. And what's happened with that is, because our water systems that we do have done really well by communities like Newark, Flint, Jackson, Mississippi, Skid Row over here, Watts, because we've done that in Puerto Rico, we have really goodwill in the community. They're like, you know what, you did it. And so we go, what else you got a problem with? And in Flint, it's a food desert. In Watts, there's an EV charging inequity, and I can get into that. That's like a real new thing. And there's a thermal inequity, which is probably two words you haven't heard together. I learned that this year from the head of public health. It's the inequality of affluent communities versus poor communities to have different heat ratios on hotter days because of green space, tree covering, asphalt, toxins, airflow, civil planning. So like, if it's 80 degrees here in Encino, it's going to be like 95 down in Watts. It's going to be 105 on Skid Row. So, but these are like 13 miles away from each other. Like, how is that? How can that be? And that's called thermal inequity. And that's a really interesting thing, because one of the biggest causes of casualties for climate change going forward is not going to be a hurricane in Biloxi, Mississippi. It's going to be heat stroke. It's going to be hotter days affecting people who don't have access to relief. So, but for food shortages, which are a larger systemic problem, and then refugees, and I don't want to speak doom and gloom because there are people working on it. Heat is one of the problems. And so when we're looking at water innovations, where does water and water access play a role to in that particular problem? Anyway, real quick, with the Flint.
That's a great point, Drew, because as part of this program we've got with the emissaries, we've really focused on what is water's role in climate change, and they're so closely connected. And for you, I've never heard of thermal inequality before, but it's so true. And as you said, it's truly a economic issue and a social issue, and it's a race issue. So thank you for bringing that to people's awareness.
Sure, I invite you to read more about it. There was a whole Nat Geo done on it, but anyway. So we rolled in and we went and we said, how are we going to go to Flint? And then we talked to a nonprofit in Washington, D.C. and said, the only way you're going to go into Flint safely is through the churches, through the faith-based community, because they're the only people that people trust there anymore. They're not going to go, don't go through the mayor, don't go through the utility. They hate all those people. The mayor, when we got there, the mayor now is dope, Sheldon Neely. The mayor that was there when we arrived, totally, she was sketchy. Which was not cool. Anyway, we didn't go through that. So we went through the faith-based community because those are ones that were still giving out water to people. And we just went in and sat down on a snowy afternoon very quietly and said, let's see how you're doing business. And we looked and there's pictures of them, or they're out there grabbing, these are like 70-year-old men that are deacons at the church loading 2 cases of water in the back of cars that pull up. And there's a line around the block for just 2 cases of water, 48 bottles. And these deacons were thinking they were going to be retired and help out at the church and play with their grandchildren, but they're after church, they're in the back with forklifts moving pallets of water around, and they've been doing it for like 5 years. And so I was with our head engineer, Jaron, and we looked at what they're doing, and it's like, we're not going to be part of the systemic replacement of every pipe in Flint because that's going to take 2 decades. But what we can do is be a bridge solution to the way they're doing it that can save carbon emissions, cash, human energy, and plastic, and cash cost. So we went back at the shop, we created the water box, and we created it around these deacons. We made it very simple to maintain. It's not a very complicated system, and water system can get very, 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 very complicated. Jaron's such a smart guy. We wanted to design it at a point, we wanted to design it at a level that a high school shop class could assemble it with a little bit of tutelage, right? Which is totally dope, and I'll tell you why. It's because we don't have any intellectual property. We're never going to sell a water box. It is always a charity. But we did a call today with a group that does VR instructions to repair like appliances and stuff. I know it's weird. It sounds boring as hell, but and they showed it. So like I can put on a VR headset and we can do it with a tablet. I can put on a VR headset and I can talk to somebody in Taiwan at a shop class and help them assemble a water box. Like how dope is that?
What's the name of that company, Drew?
It's called IQ Inc.
Oh, okay.
It was so dope.
Yeah, and I've got another company called Ather, ATHEER, that does this, and that can do it with glasses. That's augmented reality, and incredibly efficient, much less expensive.
What made this thing interesting was that it wasn't sexy, meaning it didn't run off like Unity. It wasn't designed by a bunch of PlayStation people. You don't need an app. You don't need anything. It totally like thinware. And so this is about as sophisticated as it looks. And that's good because it can like, if you're sitting here building this in rural Uganda, you're gonna have a bandwidth issue. There's no PlayStation, right? You know what I mean? We want a thin layer. Anyway, so, okay. I'm taking up all your time. I'll go quicker. Waterbox, crazy success. We did 4 more in Flint, 1 in a Latinx community center. And there was another thing of when Flint happened and there were females giving out water, they made you show an ID, and that freaked out the Latin community. So the Latin, in addition to having the water problem, there was another sub problem of the Latinx community being marginalized from relief. So that was also a problem. So we went to a Latinx community. Then we were looking, we got hit up so hard on LinkedIn and on social and everything about like, bring a water box here, and our inbox went crazy when we dropped this video. It was nuts. I had to change. It was a disaster. We call it ready, fire, aim, and we're not prepared for the incoming. And so we were like, oh shit, we got to do some. All these people want to help. We got to do something, someplace to for them to act on their empathy. So we put together like a little blue bottle that we found on Amazon, and you could subscribe and send bottles right to the church at Flint or any one of the ones you wanted. And we were blown away by the outpouring. Like people in South Africa, people in London. Like I'd get up in the morning and some woman in Fort Worth had sent bottles. I don't know how she found out about us. I don't know how she got there. I'm never going to meet her. She's never going to go to Flint. But the storytelling emoted enough with her where she took the time out of her day to order 4 bottles on that. And that's the secret sauce of technology being successful, is it needs to be on par with great story, right? There's the most famous VC company in the world is one of them is called Sequoia Capital. It was around since before the word venture capital was around. Okay, and their founder Don Valentine had 4 principles of how businesses start, and the third of them is, I'll show it to you because I'm putting it in a deck right now. That's Don Valentine, rest in peace. Is the art of storing is critically important. Money flows as a function of storytelling. Don, founder, that's a venture capitalist right there, right? So I never ever neglect story. So in our story, got people to send jugs from all over the place. Okay, we got a call. Newark's having the same problem. So we went and did 3 boxes in Newark. Then we looked at Skid Row, which is not a water quality issue, but a water access issue. There's no water on Skid Row. Skid Row is really gnarly. And it's very, very unfortunate, but it is what it is. We have a scaling housing population. And so and we went down there, it was so hot when we visited, we were like, holy crap, we didn't even think about this because Flint is cold. And Skid Row is like, it was oppressively hot. And these are people, I mean, these people are on the side, it's just horrible. So Jaron, being a genius, put a chilling unit on it. So the water's coming out ice cold. We did another one in Skid Row. Then we did 3 in Watts, which is a historic town because of Watts riots, et cetera. Then we did one in Ferguson, which is obviously is a very African-American town. Then we did them in Jackson, Mississippi. In Jackson, Mississippi is a tough state. And Jackson itself is like 83% Black, 32% below the poverty level. And they constantly have power outages, and they constantly have boil alerts, which means don't drink your water unless you boil it. So we could do 100 water boxes in Mississippi, and we will. So that's kind of where we are. I don't know what else I've left out.
Drew, could you just share with them, how did you get your funding for the expansion of Waterbox? Who were your partners there?
Well, we got lucky. Jack Dorsey from Twitter took an interest. Hey, Jack. That was pretty cool. And he gave us some money. And I would say the largest of our money came from, like, you know, selling hoodies and, you know, $10 to $50 to $100 random donations from people that just, you know, maybe someone can only afford $25, but they gave it because they care about it. And that's another function of the storytelling. If you would want to give advice to there's a lot of different ways to raise money, you know, and so with us, you know, we had some popularity, and so people would give us money. And yes, we could do a whole session on funding and capitalization of new products, but we're heading into to exploring a new philanthropic tool relatively new, called a donor advised fund. And Stuart, this might be more complicated than we have time for, but it's an unusual charitable vehicle that can both invest in companies, but can also give.
Yeah, we've set this up with Water Innovation, so we have a DAF fund. And,
oh, good.
Yeah, we're deeply familiar with it.
And yeah, you and I educated the emissaries as to how a DAF works and why it's really important.
Haven't. If you want to talk about that real quickly, that'd be fine.
So I have $1 million to give. Okay, I'm wicked rich, right? And I have $1 million to give, or 10 million. Okay, I'm like, and if I want to reduce my income so I don't get taxed. So I want to, like, give it to charity. I can give $10 million to Harvard, right? And then I say, bye, $10 million. Good luck over there. You know, maybe I can tell them I'd like it to go to, you know, women's studies or something, or, you know, whatever, anthropology. But that's about as far as it goes in terms of it's hands off at that point, unless I've given like $1 billion. Okay, with the Donors Advised Fund, at the same $10 million, now when I give that money to Harvard, I get the tax benefit. I'm not going to be taxed on it. So my, you know, $100 million I made that year is only $90. Instead, they've created these new things which are called donor advised funds. I'm the donor. I get to advise this fund, which is a philanthropic and charitable fund. I put that in the Drew Fitzgerald DAF or whatever. Okay. Now that money sits, and I get the tax write-off. It's similar to the Harvard thing. but instead I get to say more about where it goes. Okay, that's kind of important. They're a little controversial because a lot of tech bro billionaire dudes were just putting them in there and then just leaving the money, because you don't have to spend it really forever. But what the thing is, you can't pull it back out if you want to like buy a house or a Porsche or some tech bro type move. You can't it's got to stay in there, but you can do a lot of stuff while it's in there. So like, for instance, this is a for-profit company, right? Somebody with a DAF could have wanted to say, give $1 million to fund this. They could give $1 million to fund this. And then if Just Water sells for $100 million and I make, $5 million on the thing, it goes back into my DAF, and then I can go invest in the next thing simultaneously. So those are venture investments, right? And they sort of gonna, they have to tick a little bit of criteria, but most things today that you would invest in are kind of relatively ethical. And the other part is, it can also, if I still want to give money to Harvard, I can say, okay, Harvard, there's $1 million that I can go this way and give a grant. So I can do charitable grants and I can do investments. And the charitable grants tend to not come back. That's a more complicated thing called a program-related investment. But the investments can come back in, and if you're doing well, your DAF will grow and grow and grow and grow. It can have massive charitable impact. So there's DAF money is an interesting thing. So any one of you on this call, any of the emissaries are starting a are in your early stage, you need a little funding. DAFs, you guys are all special because you're mainly working in water, which is largely charitable. I would highly recommend looking at charitable money to help de-risk your company to get it where you can do follow-on money. But if that was not an option, the DAF can also invest it. So hope I did a good job.
As always, great explanation, Drew. Yes, and I just love how you explain things, especially to laymen, where others would explain it in a much more linear and non-understandable way.
Well, so Stuart, I learned this trying to teach a 12-year-old rapper. So
Well, I haven't ever heard you do rap yet, but I bet that's coming. So
not today.
Look forward to it.
Not today.
So
what's cracking?
Let's open up to the emissaries to ask questions of Drew. And as you can see, there's no question you cannot ask, and you will get a straight and very enthusiastic response. So who's first?
That was short.
I have a question.
Hi, Christina.
It sounds like you've done a ton of incredible work and so accomplished. Is there something that was like, I guess, most personally, where you felt it the most personal to you, the impact that you made?
Oh, in general, is there one that most resonated?
Yeah, I don't know, just something that you really sticks with you from all of everything that you've done.
I like, I sort of am somebody that I've had nice accomplishments in my life, and I try not to be cocky, but I tend to lean on capable. There have been neat things that I've done when I was 27 to things that I've done today. I tend not to ever really sit and take a victory lap on myself. I tend not to stop and say, look what you did in Flint. I just don't go there. I think I'm wired that way. But where I think if I did something that was, I remember the first time I ever had something on a billboard, in Times Square, I was like, well, yeah, that was a very 25-year-old attitude, And I just because I feel the need is so great, and because it's not really about me. I tend to just naturally and I'd say in my DNA to not really to be devoid of ego when it comes to this kind of stuff. But what I am proud of is generally overall helping people, right? And I know that sounds very generic, but I like talking to people like you. I like imparting knowledge here, and I'm not doing this tonight to be the smartest guy in the room. I generally like communicating with people, and I generally like understanding people and coming up with really good ideas. And I'm wired in such a way where people say, hey, I think I'm in this business. I'm doing this. And I go, well, what about this? What trying this? So, you know what it is? I'll tell you this. Having graduated out of art school, having a desire to be really cool and being an ad agency, and now on the other arc of my career, being solely from when I get up to when I go to bed, wanting to help people, brings me quite joy. And so the ability for me to have like my explanation of the DAF right there, that might help you guys in some way. It's gonna help your lexicon of understanding things that are important for you guys to see success. That me understanding a DAF in a really clear way makes me happy. That makes me happy. Right now, to me explaining a DAF to you, and if it could possibly help you, that's it. So that's a long, convoluted answer, and it's a little kind of maybe weird, but yeah, I don't really I don't know. When I married my wife, I was happy. That was a good day. Anyway, any other questions? Okay, I guess.
Oh, we have a question in the chat. I don't know if you can see that.
Hang on a second. I suck at some. Are there any projects or areas?
Madeline, why don't you just tell them the question, please?
Yeah, so it says, are there any projects or areas of need you feel like you would like to start in the future?
So I'm in the process of doing something which is kind of like, could be kind of transformational, which I'm really excited about, which is the DAF thing I was talking to you about before and the venture thing I was talking about before have never played together like this. And that's weird. And also there's, think of it like a pie with 3 parts. So venture capital around energy, food, and water, a DAF that can help support, can invest in that, but it can also do what this third thing in, which is a brand, content, and impact studio. And funds have never done that because all the fund money has to go out and invest in companies, right? They don't spend a lot of marketing and all that stuff. And that's a problem because the story, remember that storytelling I was talking about? So having a component to this, which is a hardcore media content storytelling and impact studio, which is, that's a mouthful, is really, really exciting. Because in this DAF area, in this DAF world, there's lots of DAFs all over. There's like $1 trillion in DAFs, and they got to spend it. So I'm excited about, I think it was Connor, is from this group that we're pulling together, which is crazy. This group I was in Palo Alto with is allowing me to even think bigger. And that has never really been a challenge for me in the past. Usually people are like, dude, you're thinking too big. And I'm like, no. So there are some conversations going on about really big projects, like let's create a more sustainable concrete and deploy it from Nevada to LA, like crazy shit like that. Okay, last night, I swear to God, this is a true story, and Sophia, that's from my team, if she's on, is gonna laugh. Last night I did a call with the Prince of Uganda, okay, and there's a funny story how I met him, but that we can go into that later. And we were talking about 80% of Uganda is rural. You know, only 20% of the people live in the capital, Kampala. Okay, and what we just experienced and lived through was a very scary time in a pandemic, and we're going to have trouble getting truly around the bend unless we start vaccinating the global South. Okay, and so one of the things we're talking about with him, and who's got, you know, obviously he's got huge political influence in the country, was about how do we prove in Uganda, which is not a huge country, but how do we prove in Uganda the following? We can take things like the Ford F-150 electric that's coming out, and we can jerry rig it with a refrigerator, and we can sit and we can look with this big DAF money. This could be a $20 million project, is to extend the electric grid out to parts of rural Uganda with solar that can then charge these electric vehicles that have refrigerators on them, because every vaccine, Ebola, SARS, COVID, whatever the next bad thing is, one of the essential things to getting your head around is refrigeration, right? And you're not going to, and so we have this vision of like calling up Ford, which literally it's not that out of the realm, and saying, dude, we need 10 Ford F-150s because we're going to do something cool. We're going to wrap them and we're going to bolt on badass refrigerators. and like, if so, to your answer, Connor, right? About a month ago, I'm like, you know what, we're going to do more water boxes. That's awesome. We're going to keep doing water. We're going to keep doing work at MIT and UCLA on a variety of different issues. We're creating the Nest for water, when that sounds like a lot, but it's like legit and dope. It's not going to be around for till 2024, but it could be one of the biggest public health innovations coming out. So Connor, there's that, but also having my eyes open to the amount of capital that might be available to people that are progressive thinkers really got me excited about like if you told me a month ago, hey, do you want to get involved with a large electrification project in rural Uganda? I'm like, yeah, but like how? And all of a sudden, I don't know, dude. If you jump, the net appears, and if you open the window, something's going to fly in. So, and the Prince of Uganda did. It's a weird Will Smith connection, but I'm excited about that. Yeah, I'm excited about. You know what? Also, somebody we were working on something the other day. With him, this is an interesting thing. This is really interesting for you guys. So there's this kid who grew up in a very poor Latin part of the country. Okay. And he did his best, and he got out of this particular neighborhood, went to college, and then he created a company. And he just closed his Series C for lots and lots and lots of millions of dollars, right? And the thing is, he had said, you know what, I now at 54, I'm quite profitable. Now I'm going to give back to my community. And in the Latin community, there's always a sense of, sorry, I'm getting texted. There's always a sense of giving back. There's always, Latin communities are very communal. They're around shirts, they're around giving, they're around, sorry, I'm getting like texted by like Will's product guy. And so, but here was the deal. He's like, I'm 54 and now I'm ready to start giving back. He's like, Jesus, I wish I could do it. I've done it sooner. But I spent the last 15 years like grinding on this company. I just didn't have the bandwidth to do it. Right. And so that anecdote was when that pie chart I'm talking about was, what if it was this concept of, and we literally pulled this term out of our behinds. It's called mirrored capital. So what if Christina, use an example, or Connor, what if you were like, I need $250,000 to get my thing over here. Cool. All right. And you're going to start a company. And I feel good about you. You're going to go do it. I'd say, I will give you $250,000 of this, but I'm also going to give you $250,000 of charitable capital. And you can take my for-profit capital if you set up a nonprofit that supports your company, so that the two flow like that. And the reason that that's interesting is because when we're talking to like the CEO of Chipotle, he's 50. He'll retire in 10 years, but you all on this call are going to occupy his seat in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. And if I can, in these concepts of mirrored capital or other types of things, can raise kinder, gentler, more empathetic, more charitable capitalists, you're going to occupy the C-suite one day, and you're just going to be better than him. You're going to be better than me. You're certainly getting better than like John Paul Getty, so I'm excited about that, raising a next generation of like conscientious capitalists. Wow, I just made that up.
John Mackey actually started a group called Conscious Capitalism, who was the founder of Whole Foods. And
that's right. Anyway,
so you're the second guy, Drew. Yet this whole idea of capital, and it's interesting that you're sort of juxtaposing it between the philanthropic capital that is the NGO community and what we now call social capital and social venture capital, that is having brilliant young entrepreneurs like we've got an emissary group that are looking at creating businesses which will be very successful economic businesses, yet fundamental to everything they do is, as you said, the values, the integrity, and the way that they conduct themselves in business and in life, that is all about doing well, but it's doing well for people, not just for self and just for the sake of money.
Do well by doing good.
One of the emissaries. Yeah,
Stuart, I bet in that same spirit, there's some Stanford study that says, I bet you could do this with Google. There's some Stanford study that says 2 people are here, they're going to go start a business. They're very successful, but one is philanthropic or mission driven, and one is just let's make some money. I bet there's some health outcome to this one over here, or some mental health outcome to this one over here. Like, you are what you give, yes. Do well by doing good. There's there's something over here, which is.
Oh, yes. Yeah, there are metrics that are being done to validate doing well does good, as you said, and
the health outcome.
And the best news is that we're starting to see some of the multinational companies starting to understand this and value this and appreciate this, because the consumer who is buying whatever products from, let's just say, like a big company like a Pepsi, Coke, or Nestle, the consumers that we've got here in the emissaries are like, we're not going to buy that junk. We're going to buy something from a company that we know is doing things the right way and caring for people and caring about not just making money. So this is the new way of business. And we have a whole story and thesis and white paper we've done called Transformative Business. where we believe that actually business will be the methodology and the platform and the communities that are going to transform our lives and bring richness to our lives way beyond just the money.
There you go. And, you know, I think, Stuart, to build on that, because I think that's transformative business, but not transformative in terms of like, how do we make even more money? But how do we define what profitability is? And I'll tell you this, this is interesting because we're in a very, very sad geopolitical space right now for the last 3 weeks. We are aware of that. And I'll be very pleased to say, I think we're turning the corner on actually sending 4 water boxes to Warsaw, then into Ukraine, which is like, shit. I mean, come on. I mean, that's enough to get out of bed in the morning. Anyway, more on that. But no wars were started by women that I can think of, right? And let's take the tale of 2 Bezoses. Okay, Jeff Bezos and Mackenzie Bezos are here. They both want to give away. $10 billion, we'll just say $1 billion. Okay. It's on record. You can look. Jeff Bezos went and gave money to World Wildlife Federation, National Resource Defense Council, Conservation International, all worthwhile companies or nonprofits, but they are already rich. They have cash. Okay, those are the hit lists, right? And they also are programmatically. And we love the NRDC. Don't get us wrong. We love WWF. We love CI. They're great. All right, but they're largely policy people. WWF has a few programmatics, but whatever. They're established badass nonprofit. Okay, Mackenzie Bezos. So, and he gave 10 away. So, like a wicked lot of, they're real psyched. They just got like stacked with money. Okay, Mackenzie Bezos gave it away to like 1,000 companies. And who did she give it away to? Smaller ones to Alcorn State, a historically black college and university in Jackson, Mississippi. Small startups that are racially diverse and gender diverse. And she gave away smaller slices of pie to things that she emoted to. It wasn't an ego play. There's 2 different ways of looking at the way you should bootstrap it. And Jeff came under a lot of fire about that. He doesn't really care because he kind of just doesn't care. But they were like, bro, really? You gave the money to World Wildlife Fund? Like, there's so many more effective places to do that. So I just look at that as a tale of 2 different types of empathies from a gender split. And so if you see more women in the C-suite, I think you're going to see kinder, gentler, and probably more profitable business. So to build on that, Stuart.
Thanks, Drew. Yeah, our session last week was specifically about gender and more female leadership in all forms of business and economics and political and social, and that's what's being called forward. Forward is for us to have
pretty much everything.
Take leadership roles. You got it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a 50-year-old white male. I'm glad if y'all want to unemploy me, have at it. There's a lot of room at the top. So, I'm a big proponent of that. So, what else?
Shelby, you got a question?
Business advice? Hi, Shelby. You're on mute.
Sorry. So I'm actually curious. Like, you mentioned looking into like, what was it? Thermal inequity in cities, and kind of like different projects across the U.S. And I was wondering if you've started any, and if you've had any like issues with it, especially with like local government, or just kind of to connect with communities and how you get through that.
I'm going to show you something really quick. This is pretty cool. Okay. So check this out. I wish I had a good picture of this. Hold on, guys. Sorry, this kind of went awry. Okay, boom. Damn, this is not a good photo. All right, I don't know if this is going to show, but so this is a Nat Geo that's all about thermal inequity. This is pretty much where I live. This is Encino, Westwood, Beverly Hills. And this folds out into a map. And as you walk down, this is the socioeconomic ladder, right? And this is Watts, or the areas where we're working in. And it's a tale of basically 2 cities to get, to California and Los Angeles are pretty progressive, right? All right, and they're kind of a rich state. It's high tax rate. There's a lot of good confluence of people that want to help, right? And there's also, because we're in a different era, we're in a Biden era versus a Trump era. Don't get me going on that. The T above my head does not symbolize this. I just realized after 2 years of Zooms, there's a T above my head. That I have not. We have not received any pushback, but where we look to help is to be amplifiers of that. And so there's a variety of different constituents that come around. Like, for instance, Gavin Newsom's coming down to Watts, and I will damn well, when I talk to him, and he and I sort of kind of know each other. And sorry, I'm getting zoomed early. So I'm sorry, Shelby, I kind of veered off the question. Sorry, I have this deadline that I'm on. Sorry, I'm like multi. I think I don't think we'd get pushback because our efforts are just, you know, and I think as my role in this is not to go and say, LA, you need more green space and tree cover in Watts. I will say it. I'm not going to be able to, I wouldn't be able to do it, but being what I like to say, what I like to call italicized, this is from my typography days, is to be leaning into these issues and to be really expert on them and speak with the energy that I always clearly have way too much of to people that are like Mayor Garcetti and the head of the LA Sustainable Grant Challenge, who's a good friend, Eric Hoke, and constantly bang the drum on these issues so that there can be funding and there can be understanding. And, you know, politics and making laws, which is they call the slow boring of wooden holes, can be sped up. And so I guess if you look at culture, lifestyle, and humanity, you know, it's been going on for thousands of years. I occupy this space. If I can add a chapter to that, and that when I'm done, maybe there's green space in Watts at that point, then, you know, I've lived a full life. Because somehow over the course of the last 20 years, I've established such a good network, and I'm pretty good at broadening that. I think my secret talent is I can design things really well, and I can look for opportunities and connect people really well. This answer is a little bit more about me, and it shouldn't be. Shelby, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. Pushback, or how do you want to get involved with thermal equity?
Just kind of like, have you had any issues trying to help? Like, no, nothing.
No, but I mean, if I could wave a magic wand and there was a community redevelopment situation, that would be dope. Actually, that's not true. Actually, there's a really interesting urban farm that's about to launch in Watts. So it's urban growing. Watts would probably be largely regarded as a food desert, but they have this dope farm. It's like it's all modern and cool. It's in the middle of Watts. It's really, really cool. We're putting a water box there. And, you know, it kind of takes a village to look at these issues. I have not had any pushback, but you know what? I'll tell you, Shelby, it's like this. There's not pushback, but there's a need for education, and there's a need for educating the right people. Okay. So for instance, remember how early on I was telling you that probably in the near term future, the biggest threat from climate change domestically and probably around the world is heat stroke, right? Okay. I helped a doctor in Denver coin the term enviromedics, and it's the intersection of medicine and climate change, right? Actually, that seemed like was about me. I didn't mean to be ego. I'm good at names. And so there's a group in Denver, the school, Ann Schutz, he's one of the Microsoft founders. Ann Schutz School of Medicine in Denver is a teaching hospital, but it's also probably the epicenter for where they're educating physicians coming up, younger physicians, to understand the impacts on the physical well-being from climate change. They're raising climate doctors, right? And so for me, and that's Dr. Jay Lemery, he's a badass, he's published all over the place. For me, it's helping in the mission of saying so let me give you an example. Why he started this is probably before most of your times, but when Stuart and I grew up, we grew up in it's called the Cold War, right? And it was like, I grew up like when I was in like 6th grade, it was like, oh my God, Russia. No, when I was in 1st grade, it was the redcoats. That's what I was afraid of from the revolution from Paul Revere. And then as I moved on and started, until I remember my mom coming in, she goes, what's wrong? I go, I think the redcoats are coming. Like, you know, as a kid. And so so, and then as we would realize, like in 6th grade, there was this really, really scary film about a nuclear disaster called The Day After. And it was so scary, they sent a note home from school being like, this is really, don't show your kids or whatever. And so the Cold War was a thing where Russia, and it's odd because we're seeing resurgence over the last month, the Cold War was a really scary time where 2 nuclear things were like doing this, right? And what actually took the wind out of the Cold War was a group of doctors from Russia and a group of doctors from America got together while, Khrushchev and whoever it was, Reagan or whoever, were butting heads. These doctors got together and defined nuclear proliferation and nuclear war as a public health crisis. And that definition from both Russian physicians to Russians and Westernized medicine to Westerners helped take the tension out of this by defining it in a different way. And, the Cold War obviously, went away for the time being. And that group of doctors won the Nobel Peace Prize. And so brilliant. If I have a sore arm and I go to a doctor, I'm like, yo, what's up? He's going to say, go get an MRI and x-ray. Okay, I trust you. You're smart. Okay. When I go to my tax accountant, hey, send this thing on the star 50, whatever. When I go to a lawyer, he's like, do this. You listen. And you listen to doctors, lawyers, and accountants. Where is Western medicine in the climate change conversation? It's not there. And if you frame, and so to Shelby, I know this is like the longest answer to a very simple question, but to be able to frame this question up into different constituents that can have it over roll. Because I'm going to have that conversation. I'm going to have that conversation with Garcetti. I'll have that conversation with the head of sustainability. And I'm also going to have a conversation with the CEO of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Right? Because I'll be in those rooms and I'll just be like, dude, I'm banging on this. You got to do something on this because you're going to get voted out. So anyway, all that to say, there's not pushback. I think there needs to be push up. If that, I don't know, that seems like a little cheeky of a saying, but to push this up into bigger spheres is, I think, where this needs to go. And every time I talk about this, I think of new ways to frame it. And so Shelby, I promise when I talk to Mayor Garcetti, it won't be as convoluted as I was with you. But by you asking that question and me developing the answer, it helps me fundamentalize why I'm pissed and what can be done and why it should be done.
Well, it's
Sorry,
really
Shelby.
spot on, Drew. You're spot on because many of our emissaries are in the area of health studies, and linking health and environment are just so deeply connected. And it's so much more personal to talk about your health versus to talk about the environment, which seems amorphous and seems separate.
So I'm going to do this. If you are involved with that, this book, Enviromedics, good primer, super good primer. It's easy to read.
Can somebody put a link in the chat?
Starts you off on the climate and medicine journey.
Yeah, I'm dropping the name of that in the chat, and then we have reached time, but it looks like we have one more question from Jackie. If you wanted to share that.
I'm good, so you let me know. Jackie.
Yeah. Hi. This has been a very interesting talk. Thank you for being here for today. I just had a question. Do you guys work with the tribes at all, like indigenous peoples on reservations? Like, has that been a focus for you all? Because I know, especially in like Navajo Nation, COVID was a huge and is a huge problem because of lack of access to clean water and just like in general day-to-day life. That's not something that most reservations have, is like access to drinking water. So have you guys thought about any partnerships with them at all?
100%. This is what I'll tell you what my experience has been, Jackie. We are very understand the Hopi and the Navajo. There's a lot of actually homeless Native Americans that have lived in Phoenix, and there's a nonprofit in Phoenix called St. Vincent de Paul, and it's so freaking hot in Phoenix that check these numbers out. They give away almost 30,000 bottles of cold water a week. A week. That's insane. You know what would that look like in a factory floor? That's insane. It would fill this like almost like a neighborhood. It's insane. Okay, and a lot of the I'd say about maybe, I don't know the exact stats, but something like 33% of the homeless population there are of Native American descent. Now, we have gotten calls from Canadian tribes, from West New York tribes, Seneca, We've gotten calls from Cheyenne up in Wyoming, North Dakota, and we've gotten calls from the Navajo. And we just now, I don't know if Sophia's on the call, are doing something in Navajo. There's so many native indigenous conversations going on. Here's what the challenge has been. It's really a complicated community. We are like, literally, I point blank, I'm like, I will give you a water box tomorrow if you tell me an address and who wants to run it. And it's just been so just convoluted, the conversations. We had a donor that the guy who founded GoPro was like, I want to do something up here in northern Cheyenne. And we're like, great, thank you for donation. He calls back, he's like, what's going on with my grant? I'm like, dude, I can't find anyone to accept these water boxes. It's been very challenging. So when you look at justice, and I look at the intersection of race and water a lot. Okay, and the intersection of race and water has been around since before Jim Crow America. Okay, Black and to a certain extent brown, which is largely more so Black in those days, but Black and brown communities are largely disadvantaged from access to water. Now, as we start having a broader conversation, and thank you for Joe Biden for appointing Deborah Haaland as the Department of the Interior, first Native American woman, dope. We start to expand after the unfortunate demise of George Floyd. We start to expand our acronym to BIPOC. And that's good that there's an I in there. And that I has certainly is a situation where we are having the hardest time penetrating this community, and we're doing shit for free. We were like, we will give you water. This will help you. It's been very challenging to navigate. I think we are going to be successful in that. And we are, figure this out. We are with Gabe Noguez from the Navajo. So we're working on it. It's been a heck of a lot harder than doing something in Jackson. That was a long answer again too, sorry. What's up, Christine?
No, that was great, thank you.
I empathize with you, Drew. I've had a lot of challenges dealing with the indigenous tribes and trying to support them with funds. And there's a huge cultural difference. Yeah. There's a lot of challenges there, and I hope that we're able to achieve some greater success with those communities. Hey, Wes, do you have a question? I bet you do for Drew.
Yeah. Wow.
Hi, Wes. Cool name.
Hey, how you doing? I'm not one of the emissaries as such.
But you're an active. He's an active advisor in our community and fully engaged.
Oh, great.
And Wes has written one of the best books I've ever read on water called The Universal Code. So something for you to
actually
you
it's
know
called
about.
Universal Water.
Universal Water. Yes, thanks. And he lives in Santa Barbara, so you guys aren't far from each other.
All right, there you go.
So
what's your last name, Wes? Oh, okay, you were here.
Marin. M-A-R-R.
Oh yeah. Hey,
yeah,
it's in stock on Amazon.
Yeah. So one of the things that you mentioned that was interesting to me is the food, water, energy nexus. Okay. And I do, as a scientist, I do some work with footprints and that kind of stuff, looking at really how we can make a difference in terms of water conservation. And a lot of the things that we're doing in terms of, save at the tap, it's politically easy, but it's not really where it can have the most impact. A person's water footprint, it lies almost solely within what they eat and their food choices and food waste, which you've talked about. And you talked about water, energy, food. I was wondering what you're doing on that front.
Well, from an energy standpoint, I mean, there's a variety of things that we're doing. I mean, like the examples that Uganda thing, that is a concept right now. That's not a go project yet, but I'm feeling confident and I have a can-do spirit. But so I think when you look at this, there's intersectionalities of a lot of things, right? And I'm sure everyone on this call understands the idea of nexus, which is like the intersectionality of stuff, the energy food nexus, the idea of solar panels in rural solar, S plus S, solar plus storage in the rurality of Africa has a knock-on effect to public health, and not just the way that solar would normally, meaning less emissions, better public health, cleaner air, these types of things. So when you look at the nexus of that project, that's a vaccination, that's a nexus between energy, clean energy, X, public health. Okay, and so when you look at from a food standpoint, I don't know where it's going with this, is the ability to do communication. So when we look at, actually, you know what, Wes, I'm going to approach this from a different standpoint. Almost everything is a nexus. Okay, when you look at from an agriculture standpoint, or even more so from a regenerative soil standpoint, okay? Regenerative soil, here's the thing. If all the dirt on the planet were turned into soil, and soil is either somewhere between 3% and 6% organic dirt with organic content, right? It holds more water and reduces drought. If all the soil, all the dirt on the planet were turned to soil, we could decarbonize the planet all the way back to when the machine age started. That's freaking insane. We could undo not just last year's carbon emissions, not just hold steady at our centigrade, but go back to, freaking, 1820s. That's insane, right? And so, Wes, I don't know if I'm actually answering your question, but I do believe in intersectionalities, and I do understand where I was going with the soil thing is if land is not farmable, people leave, right? And right now land is farmable, but it's getting hard to farm it every year. Warren Buffett's brother, Howard Buffett, wrote a book called 40 Chances. And that's about the farmers got 40 chances to get it right. Fascinating book, by the way. I don't know if I got it nearby. Write that one down. It's dope. Howard Buffett, 40 Chances. Incredible on agriculture. And it basically was all about what he learned from failing so much. It's a fascinating book. And so when you look at the ability for soil or an agricultural baseline that just continually sucks and gets worse and worse and worse and goes from soil to dirt, people leave. That's refugees, that's migration, that's not good. That's mental health, that's physical health, that's stress, duress, and death. So that's one intersectionality. And I already did the whole race X water. That's an intersectionality of why is poor water in the domestic built environment of the US a racial problem? Why is there food insecurity and food inequity in BIPOC communities? That's race X food. Why is there lack of ability to participate in the solar or clean energy economy in Black and brown communities? Not a lot of homeownership. Race X energy, right? So there's a whole intersectionality there. From the ag space, we certainly talk about it. I have a good relationship with Paul Hawkins. I'll show you. I don't know where his book is. I have his book here somewhere. I highly recommend Regen, but
Project Drawdown. Project Drawdown.
Actually, no, his new one, Stuart, Regeneration. It's pretty dope. Where is it? Oh,
I haven't seen that one yet.
It's probably backwards, but Regeneration. This is dope. It's all about agriculture. So that's dope. Wes, I think I'm rambling. I don't know if I'm actually answering your question about intersectionalities, but we real quick. So I have here some candy, and they look like little starbursts, right? Okay. They look like little starbursts. They're very yummy. Okay. Now this just looks seemingly like whatever candy. This candy is made entirely from fruits and vegetables that were going to be thrown away. And when you eat it, it's called Faves. It's totally dope. Faves, sweets. Okay, so this is not only a fantastic education. The Faves stands for fruits and vegetable sweets. This is made from ugly fruit. So, or what we call ugly food. Ugly food is like not a pretty looking apple that sits at Whole Foods, but it's an apple that Whole Foods is like, yeah, we can't sell that. So, right. And if you think about Wes, I'm going to land the plane here in a second, but this is an innovation and a very creative. I'm sort of like an advisor to this company. This is a super innovation by a bright woman who saw an opportunity to look at food waste and to powderize sorghum and all sorts of stuff that go in this. These are literally just vegetables, fruits and vegetables. Like if I eat all this, like I eat it all day, I will have my serving of USDA fruits and vegetables. By eating candy, come on, dog. So why that's important is food waste is really, really important because here's a fact. Okay, if all total global food waste were a country, let's just call it a country just for a hypothesis, the 3 largest carbon emitters in the world would be China, the United States, and global food waste, right? That's how much the degrading, decomposition of agricultural output. 33% of the food that gets made up here up near you west, near Santa Barbara and Ojai, the Central Valley, 33% of that food goes to waste, and it degrades, and it's not good, and it makes carbon emission. So I don't know where I was going with that, but other than Wes, I don't know if I answered your question.
No, that's good. That's good. Yeah. And the other interesting thing is 1/3 of that goes to waste, and 90% of a person's water footprint is food. So basically they're throwing out, they could do more by eating those and not wasting that food than they could saving water at the tap. If 100%. They want to conserve water, particularly in California. Yeah.
Yeah, and also West, to that point is like the scary statistics about how much water goes into a pistachio. It's insane, dude. Tree-based nuts, it's just crazy, And you know the water footprint of a burger is ridiculous, and it goes for clementines and all that stuff. And so when I was over at Civil and Environmental Engineering, there was a lot of engineering around, more drought resistant, more water compressed water banking and more compressed water, and using more recyclable drought resistant types of fruit or growing mechanisms. So I think there is a way to and it's going to take a concerted effort. There's a way to engineer ourselves out of that problem. If there's a term called, if somebody calls you a Malthusian, that means you're somebody who doesn't believe that that the population can sustain itself. There was an economist in England called John Malthus, and he suspected that population growth was going to scale beyond food supply, right? And that was a scary thing. It was like, we're going to run out of food as a planet, right? And then a really interesting guy named Norman Borlaug, who was an agronomist, did a bunch of hybrid stuff in Mexico and then in India, and he created something. Wheat grows like this, and it falls over, and a lot of wheat gets wasted. And so when he created something called dwarf wheat, which was this big, and it didn't fall over. And as a result of him creating this hybrid dwarf wheat that was lower, but still had all the grains at the top, he was able to feed 1 billion people in India and pull them out of poverty. And he won the Nobel Peace Prize, I think, in 1962. But the doom and gloom sayers, innovation and science are a way for nature to help itself. And I think you got to go in with that sort of optimism as you, from what I've seen from looking at civil and environmental engineering at MIT, there are people working on this. They need all our help, but science to the rescue, I say.
Yeah, but I think as you say, even the best science needs a good story.
Heck yeah. Oh my God, yeah. I'm doing my best, Wes. I'm doing my best.
Okay.
Okay, any more questions before we end with Drew tonight? Anyone else have a thirsty question?
I just have a small question, and it's kind of a follow-up to Jackie's from earlier. But you mentioned that with the water boxes, one of the challenges you had to kind of adapt to was extreme heat. But what about extreme cold, like in Arctic environments? My research kind of looks at water insecurity in Alaska Native communities. And so I was just interested if you guys have done anything with like extreme cold.
No, we haven't. And that's a very interesting question. I one time did an out of bounds skiing lesson, and the guy was telling me about if you got like stranded by an avalanche, how much snow you would need to melt to hydrate you in this extreme. And it was insane. It was like I could never melt that much snow. It's like something like 200 cubic meters of snow to get a glass of water or something like that. So I don't really. That's an interesting question, Christina. I might have to follow up on that. I would think like Nanuet communities or whatever would not necessarily be water insecure because there's such a water pack around them. But I mean, so let's put it this way. I'm not aware of water insecurity in those sort of glacial and really, really extreme areas. And if there are people there and is power, it would be not hard to retro-engineer these things with a warming unit. That's a good question. You stumped me. I do not have an answer for you, Christina, but now knowledge is not absolute. So I guess I got to go figure this out, and I got to get back to Christina Muller.
Yeah. That is a great question. And I think, as Drew has answered, there are less acute needs in most of those Arctic regions, as
Probably.
Really Drew said, because a lot of them have frozen water there, and it's probably some of the healthiest water that's on our planet as well, because it's some of the oldest water, and with that goes a lot of health benefits as well as alcohol.
We're losing a buddy. Stuart, Utah. I have a question for the group. So I have a bottle here of water, right? And is it possible that this water this sip of water that I take right now has been sipped by thousands and millions of people throughout the existence of time? Meaning, when we take a drink of water, is that possibly a drink of water that Alexander the Great drank?
Appreciate you giving your time and brilliance.
Sorry. Okay, I had a question for the group. Stuart's breaking up. Shelby, I want you to figure out the answer for me.
Isn't it like technically yes, because all the atoms that we have right now are the atoms that were like there when Earth first was formed?
Technically, yes.
Right? Yeah.
All right, Hope Novak, Nowacki, Nowacek. Is the amount of water that we have in the planet now the same amount of water that has been there all along? It just moves in hydrological cycles. Bueller. Go ahead.
Isn't that no, because like sometimes comets will like bring in water?
I don't know.
Or
I don't know the answer. This is a concept that came up this week, and I'm throwing it out to a bunch of water emissaries to say, could this be true? I think Hope's like, kinda, but you're way reducing the complexity of that question.
I mean, technically, yes, all of the matter and all of the energy that has been on the earth. I mean, energy is like a little bit different, but all of the matter that's been on this earth has been here since its creation, and it's just been in different phases.
So I could be drinking water that George Washington drank.
Yes.
Okay, that's awesome. All right, cool. All right, well, we'll leave you on that crazy, mind-blowing factoid.
Yeah, we're all drinking dinosaur pee.
Okay, Stu's putting his own kind of spin on it. I'm going to go with the Washington theory, just for palatability.
Yeah, and Drew, we'd be happy to share with you. We had a water quiz that we had, I think it was 2 weeks ago, that had some pretty fascinating questions and answers to those questions, which we'll share with you. If Madeline or Caroline, if you could share them with Drew so he can have them and have the benefit of seeing some of those obtuse questions and even more obtuse answers sometime. That would be great. And I just want to leave the emissaries with understanding that, Drew is really an artist. He comes from the design world, and he has morphed himself into a businessman, into a philanthropist, and really a social capitalist to look at using business in a way to improve the world. And so he is I'd say, a model, an inspiration for each of you to realize you can do this. There are no limits for you and your vision and your passion. And as you can see, Drew has unlimited passion for what he is doing. And that's the key. Whatever you do in your life, if you do what you love and you're passionate about, you will be hugely successful financially, emotionally, and spiritually. So Drew has been so generous to share with us his time. He continues to offer that, and will be involved with us in our community in the future. And I'm just so grateful for Drew to share all that he's done and to show you that whatever your dream is, you can make it come true.
Thank you, Stuart. And thank you all. Go do it. When you love something, you learn to reinterpret it. So go reinterpret it. All right, Connor. I see you. All right, guys, listen, have a good night anytime. And thank you, Stuart and Madeline, of course.
Thank you so
All right,
much.
go do good work. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.